Welcome to Sunrise, first light for what's next on B2B revenue teams. Lots to cover today, so let's dive in.
Yeah, let's unpack this. Let's maybe slow this one down a bit because the story I'm about to share, well, it's really worth sitting with for a moment. A few years back, we were working with a client who landed a lead you absolutely dream about. We're talking the heiress of a billion-dollar cosmetics fortune, all from a cold email about a new data strategy for her direct-to-consumer brand. The discovery call, it was fantastic, really great. She asked for just 1 or 2 case studies before moving forward. Simple enough, right? And then just nothing. Silence. For 2 whole weeks. So we found out in our priority ABM review that the case studies still hadn't actually been sent. One was ready, sure, but the other one, it was just buried deep in marketing's backlog with like 100 other items. Now, had we not been operating these things called demand pods, that deal might honestly still be waiting. Who knows? But with sales enablement, marketing, and the business development rep all together in that pod, we actually finished the case study that very afternoon. It went out, she replied within 48 hours, and boom, the opportunity moved forward. Now look, this isn't just some fun anecdote, right?
This kind of thing is happening thousands, maybe even millions of times every single day across demand teams. It's one of the biggest issues we're probably not talking about enough. When you look at that situation, who was really at fault? I mean, the sales rep was technically accountable for the deal. Marketing was responsible for the case study, but they were completely buried. And the business development rep, they had no formal role at that stage, but you could argue they're actually best suited to push it forward.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here, truly fascinating, is that this kind of silent friction, it's happening constantly across revenue teams, all the time. The very structures that we put in place, the ones meant to create clarity, like those R.A.I.C charts we all, diligently create, they often end up creating choke points instead. It's ironic, really, and it's not just a feeling or a hunch. There's data. Consider this startling statistic. Only about 10% of marketing qualified leads ever actually become sales qualified leads.
Wow, only 10%. 1 in 10.
1 in 10, exactly. Think about that for a moment. And from there, well, it gets even tighter. Only maybe 30-45% of those sales qualified leads become opportunities. And then, depending on your deal size, maybe 5-10% of those actually close. So the data, it clearly shows 2 major choke points, right? First, that marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead handoff. And second, the sales qualified lead to opportunity handoff. It really highlights the severity of this friction at those crucial points.
Okay, so we've identified this really pervasive problem of silent friction. But it begs the question, doesn't it? Why is it so persistent? Our source material really digs into the root causes, yeah. What's the first big problem that jumps out?
Yeah, one of the biggest issues, I think, is the idea of having a single owner per stage. On paper, it seems logical, makes sense. You get clearly defined responsibility, clear accountability tied to one specific role, like marketing owns the MQL stage. But in practice, it really limits flexibility. It slows momentum because basically no one else feels empowered or maybe even incentivized to step in or act outside their specific lane.
Huh. It sounds efficient on the surface, We're always taught to assign clear responsibility. But you're saying it's actually a bottleneck here. And okay, then what happens when it does move to the next person?
Precisely. And that leads straight into the second problem. Accountability just seems to disappear at the edges, at the handoffs. Handoffs are often treated almost like the end of one person's job, task complete, rather than the beginning of shared ownership. So take a business development representative, for instance. They pass a sales qualified lead over to sales, and then they just move on, even if that deal completely stalls out later.
Right. It's like passing the baton in a relay race and then just walking off the track before the next runner even gets going.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. And without a clearly defined handoff owner or maybe shared responsibility there, opportunities just linger without any real urgency.
Yeah, I think we've all seen that happen, been on the receiving end of a deal that just fizzled out and you're left wondering who dropped the ball. It's incredibly frustrating. What else contributes to this?
Well, next up, we have the issue of minimal consent and context. That consented column, the C on a R.A.I.C chart, often it's just ceremonial. Heads of functions might sort of nod and approve movement in the process, but they aren't really actively involved in ensuring readiness or, critically, passing along that deep context. So what happens? Leads move forward, but with really thin or sometimes even missing context. And that forces the team in the next stage to slow way down and basically relearn everything from scratch.
Okay, so the handoff is weak. And what's the last piece?
And finally, the informed role is often just too passive. Being informed, the I in R.A.I.C, rarely means being positioned to actually step in or help prevent things from stalling. A head of sales, for example, might see a report after the fact, maybe weeks later, showing that momentum dropped, but they can't do anything to prevent that drop when it's actually happening in real time.
Right. It's like reading the news instead of influencing the outcome.
So, okay, if that's the fundamental problem, these four issues, what's the shift? What does the solution actually look like? The core shift, really, is expanding that responsible column, the R, to include basically everyone in the pod or team who can potentially unblock progress. Crucially, though, you still keep one person clearly accountable for the ultimate outcome. So there's still clear ownership. In this removing friction model, let's take marketing qualified leads. Marketing is still accountable, absolutely. But business development is looped in right from the very start. They're involved. Then for sales qualified leads, okay, they're owned by business development. But marketing and sales, they're already influencing and preparing for the next step. And opportunities, they aren't just a solo mission for the account executive anymore. No, business development and marketing are right there, helping keep that momentum alive. It's more like a tag team effort.
Okay, so wait, you're saying having more people involved, or at least aware and potentially responsible, actually makes things faster? That feels kind of counterintuitive compared to the traditional clear lanes approach, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, on the surface. But look, it's not about more people just muddying the waters or causing confusion. It's about a really clear shift from these rigid sequential handoffs to continuous shared motion. When you look at the before versus after, it's stark. Before, you had those clear lanes, sure, but every single transition was basically a dead stop. Context got lost, accountability was ambiguous right at those edges. Now, with this idea of shared motion, but without blurring the ultimate ownership, these pods can keep deals moving forward constantly without waiting for it to be strictly your turn. Handoffs can actually happen at full speed. This overlap, it turns what used to be these really rigid handoffs into more flexible handshakes. They become faster, smoother, and frankly, much more resilient to bumps in the road.
Handshakes, not handoffs. I like that. It paints a picture of connection rather than just passing something off. And this isn't just a theory, right? It's something that gets baked into some established frameworks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When you look at a pursuit framework like, say, purposeful pursuits, which is really a model emphasizing that end-to-end alignment in revenue generation, the difference becomes really obvious. In the old R.A.I.C model, you define roles pretty much in isolation, stage by stage. But in this evolved model, each stage of the pursuit, from the initial planning through design and into execution, it's actively supported by all the relevant functions, with that shared accountability baked right in from the start. That's why in something like purposeful pursuits, account selection isn't just demand leadership's job in a silo. And those warm to hot accounts aren't just sales' sole responsibility anymore. You have business development, marketing, sometimes even partners, all actively involved in moving the ball forward in basically every column, every step of the way. The goal is actually pretty simple when you think about it. You either win or you lose as one cohesive revenue team, period. No gaps, no dead stops, just constant forward motion.
That makes a lot of sense. So bringing this home for everyone listening,
Yeah.
what does this all mean for you? What's the takeaway?
Yeah, so this raises, I think, an important question for you listening to consider this week. Here's your next move. Pull up your own R.A.I.C chart, or, even just sketch out your current process if you don't have a formal one. Then ask yourself this: where could introducing shared responsibility, maybe expanding that R just a little bit, speed up velocity without completely muddying the waters of clarity? Just find one spot. Where could someone who is currently just informed maybe be empowered to intervene and help unblock progress if needed? See if even that small shift makes a tangible difference.
That's a great practical step.
Because ultimately, the real enemy here, it isn't complexity. We can handle complexity. The real enemy is those valuable deals dying quietly in the gap between yours and mine.